When most people think of historical preservation, they might think of museums that house significant historical artifacts such as the U.S. Constitution or the preservation of historical buildings and structures, but one part of historical preservation that not many people seem to know about is railroad preservation. What is railroad preservation? Railroad preservation is an aspect of historical preservation focused on preserving railroad history. Railroad history can be preserved as simply as taking photos or videos of railroads and their day-to-day operations, or it can be as elaborate as the operational restoration of vintage locomotives. There doesn't seem to be a certain time when the railroad preservation movement began, but my research has shown that the photographic documentation of railroads began in the 1860s with James Ryder, a professional photographer from Cleveland who was hired to photograph the construction of the Atlantic and Great Western Railway in 1862. And throughout the rest of the 1860s, photographers documented the building and completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, one of the most significant events in American history. For a more in-depth view into why this cause is so important, I interviewed 4 friends of mine to get their opinions on the matter. Why do you think that railroad preservation is important?
I think railroad preservation is important because it reminds this country, it reminds all the people involved within the industry what it once was and what it has the potential to be.
What do you believe is the most important aspect of railroad preservation?
I think the most important aspect of railroad preservation is conserving the ideals and overall, I guess, concepts of what the industry once was and what it has the potential to become once again.
Right. Why should people care about railroads in general?
Railroads are a great and efficient way of transporting goods, people, all across the country, extremely efficiently.
Right. What can be done to help preserve railroads?
What I think can be done to preserve railroads is by increasing funding for them and also eliminating certain business operating standards such as precision scheduled railroading, which is essentially eliminating trains in order to combine them, which really just affects the customer in a negative way. In this case, if we had done any of the things, the railroad would really strive to become what it is destined to be.
Alrighty, thank you for your time. What do you believe is the most important aspect of railroad preservation?
The most important aspect of railroad preservation is how you preserve it. It could be a museum or a tourist line or even a short line, if anything, using old equipment that no one wants to use anymore, such as old GE engines like the U-boat or the old Burlington Northern SD-40s.
Why should people care about railroads in general?
Because without railroads, we would have to either be waiting in a long line at an airport or sitting in traffic in a car or just not doing anything in general. Railroad gets you to point A to point B the fastest way possible, and it carries the most cargo than planes.
What can be done to help preserve railroads?
Don't let them go to waste. Don't let them be extinct. Once Mother Nature regains what it has created, there will be no more of it, such as old freight equipment or passenger equipment sitting around in yards and sidings as you see weeds and vines growing all over.
Why do you think that railroad preservation is important?
Railroad preservation is important because it reminds everyone of how the railroads were created and what they did in their time when they were around, such as the mighty Pennsylvania Railroad of the Northeast, or the Seaboard Coastline of the Southeast, or the Santa Fe of the Southwest and West.
Alrighty, thank you for your time. Do you think that railroad preservation is important?
I feel like railroad preservation is important because the railroad is the backbone of the American economy. It gets large pieces of cargo where they need to be efficiently. It gets people where they need to go without sitting in any kind of traffic. It's a great stress reliever for the American economy. If something like this dies out, it could greatly hurt the American culture.
People care about railroads in general.
People should care about railroads because without railroads, there would be no stress-free economical way to get from point A to point B, whether it be themselves or a large piece of cargo that they need to get from California to New York without a surplus of truck charges, many airplane transfers and everything that could drive up the cost a lot.
What can be done to help preserve railroads?
Just spend time researching what railroads have done for the American economy. They can, instead of just seeing what they think they see, they can spend time researching about the railroad and just get involved locally, whether it be donations to preserve a local railroad that has served a certain city or state for a long time.
What do you believe is the most important aspect of railroad preservation?
I think the most important aspect of railroad preservation is the economic aspect, where the more trains you have running, the less semi-trucks you're going to have on the road, the less traffic you're going to have in your major cities. You're going to have less emissions with less trucks. Trains are way more fuel efficient than any truck you could have on the road, even with all these electric trucks they may be coming out with.
Why do you think that railroad preservation is important?
It teaches the young generation about the history and how America was built from the ground up.
Right. What do you believe is the most important aspect of railroad preservation?
The most important aspect of it would be teaching the younger generation of how the railroad became a thing and etc.
Right. Why should people care about railroads in general?
Railroads in general can take you many places as Amtrak. Let's do that. Amtrak can take you many places across the country, and as other countries can take you basically anywhere, which is a good means of transportation.
What can be done to help preserve railroads?
Charities should have a thing. It's you donate a certain little amount of money and then like a certain percent's taken out. Then it goes to preserving like a railroad line or something, or preserving a certain locomotive to teach the younger generation about the history of the locomotive or the history of the line or who owned the line.
Alrighty, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
As shown by these interviews, there are many reasons as to why railroad preservation is important, and the many ways railroads and their history can be preserved for generations to come. In addition to the historical value of railroad preservation, there's also a sentimental value. Many families in the country have at least one relative that worked for a railroad or a railroad-related service. By preserving railroad history, many people's family legacies are also preserved along with every signal, coach, and locomotive. For example, someone's great-grandfather could have fired this locomotive when it was in revenue service, or someone's uncle could have been a conductor collecting tickets in the passenger car, and someone's father or husband is probably operating this train seen here and have operated many more to this day. Furthermore, this sentiment doesn't just come from railroad families, it also comes from the people that make railroads their hobby. Many, if not all, railroad enthusiasts or rail fans support railroad preservation, and some are even actively involved in railroad preservation. Through the years, rail fans have gotten together in order to help preserve America's railroad history through the creation of organizations such as the National Railroad Historical Society, or NRHS, founded in 1935. Another contribution rail fans make towards railroad preservation is the photography and videography of trains and railroad operations. As mentioned earlier in the video, this is one of the most basic acts of preserving railroad history, as photos and videos can preserve and provide insight into many aspects of railroading, from what locomotives are currently in use at the time, what railroad or railroads currently operate in the area, and what types of industries are served by rail in a certain area. In addition, some rail fans also collect small railroad artifacts for their own personal collections. These personal collections can include old timetables, signal heads, locomotive lights, number boards, bells, and horns, all of which are small ways of preserving railroad history, but are important nonetheless. While a good amount of rail fans support and/or volunteer for railroad preservation efforts, their numbers and money aren't always enough to help, which is why many railroad museums and preservation organizations need all the help they can get from the public. Often, public support is achieved through the offering of passenger excursions. Excursions are a great way to garner both public and financial support. Passenger excursions can take many forms, from simple end-to-end hourly runs along a railroad museum's trackage to all-day excursions along the tracks of a participating host railroad. Public excursions are not only a great way for railroad museums to support themselves financially, but they are also a great way for the public to experience what it was like to ride a passenger train during their heyday in the early to mid-20th century, as many public excursions use passenger coaches and locomotives built before the 1950s. This is another way to delve into the importance of railroad preservation, as it keeps the experience of passenger railroading alive in an age where passenger trains are just a budget cut away from extinction. Railroading is a very dynamic industry, and what you see today might not be there tomorrow. Old locomotives and signals get replaced, trackside buildings that haven't been used in decades get torn down, and rail lines can get sold off to other railroads or outright abandoned altogether. These sudden and frequent changes of the railroading industry can describe the urgency to preserve what we can while we can. Sadly, not everything can be saved from the scrapper's torch, and not everything can be restored to operating condition. Costs, availability of parts, space, lack of manpower, and government regulations are some of the biggest enemies of railroad preservation, and can limit what can be simply saved or outright restored. Reasons such as those are some of the biggest reasons why railroad preservation projects and groups need all the help they can get in preserving some of the most historically and culturally significant pieces of machinery built in this country. If these groups failed to preserve railroads, so much history wouldn't be lost and forgotten. But remember, while it is very important to save what we can from the past, if we don't save what we have now, there will be no past to remember. Alright, why do you think that railroad preservation is important?
It allows for it allows for other younger generations to actually learn the history of making, like how America was made.
Alright.
Good job.
Yeah, we need to edit that. Alright,
Take two.
take two. What do you believe is the most important aspect of railroad preservation?
Most important aspect. Good question. I think of that one now.
Hang on, because we can cut this. So, like, into take one, action.
Why do you think that railroad preservation?
I'm a jokester.
Why do you think that?
Why?
All right. Why do you think that railroad preservation is important?
My bad.
Now it's you.
Want to get Tyler?
All right.
I'm gonna go after Tyler.
Okay. We'll do it. Alright.
Why do you think that
I'm trying not to laugh. I can't smile. It's your fault too.
That's not how you do it, Will!
Will?
You do this crap.
Alright, I'll do it. I'll do the cameraman today. How do you start a video on this thing?
It's already started.
Oh, it is.
We keep.
All right.
Ready? Whenever you're ready, just go.
Hang on.
Wait, we gotta grab. You gotta put your arms down. You gotta put your arms. Will, you gotta put your arms up there. You
I need to just get ready, get in the mood for this.
It's that frappuccino.
Wait, where's the script? Whether it be themselves or a large piece of cargo that they need to get from.
The most important aspect of railroad preservation. Why do you think that